One. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting film journey here on Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but today we are going to be going on about another birthday pick from our good friend Brandon. So, Brandon, what movie did you have us watch for this week?
So we're looking at the 1990 film Pump Up the Volume, directed by Allan Moyle, as my birthday pick. I always seem to, I guess as of at least since my father's passing in 2021, it seems like I've dedicated this time to him. And this is my second of my two kind of talk radio centric films. It's about an individual, a young rebel, who decided to take to the pirate airwaves to try and brighten his own life as he fades into the background of the suburban wastelands of Arizona.
Okay.
So, Dave, was this your first time watching?
In its full entirety, yes. I believe that I have seen bits and pieces of this over time, and I've just not known what film the pieces went to in my mind. And I've owned a copy of it for quite some time, but I never sat down and fully watched it from start to finish. But I'm glad that I did. I tend to like things that Christian Slater is in from time to time. So, but yeah, this one's definitely different than talk radio, and I think I feel like this is almost like a radio edition of like Rebel Without a Cause. You know, it's got that kind of chemistry to it. You know, that type of message, if you get my drift.
So it certainly has more heart to it, in my opinion, but it's going to be, it's quite a show.
It was enjoyable. So thanks for putting a spotlight on
it. Anything else on your first impressions?
Not right now. I'm sure we'll get into it.
All right, Tammy, is this your first time seeing Pump Up the Volume?
I believe so. Like David, I think I've seen bits and pieces of it before. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good. It was definitely a different scene how young he was in this. I think Christian Slater. But yeah, I liked it. It's how do I put it?
In a sense, it kind of reminded me of another film that was more of a PSA film called The Wave, where you know, you get an idea out there and it just catches on, and then it just builds from there, and then you don't know how to control it, but it becomes like this like big, you know, big thing, and people start rallying around you, and then things happen, real things, you know. So
I guess what I find interesting about it is how easily things are taken out of context. You know, people only hear what they want to hear, and you know, and you see that in this big time. You know, what it reminds me of a lot of is not, it does, you don't hear about it so much anymore, but when I was growing up about music in particular, like lyrics for songs that were taken like out of context and misunderstood, and you know, it kind of reminds me of that. As I remember um, having some problems fighting to hear songs that I wanted to hear because adults totally took the song for something totally different than what it was. So in a way, it kind of reminded me of things like that. Is people just only hearing what they want to hear or seeing what they want to see and not seeing the whole picture on things. So
Oh yeah, totally in that.
I think that's one thing that caught my attention on this. I mean, just just for example, Master of Puppets by Metallica. I ended up in a big fight with parents about that because they said that the song was telling you to do drugs. And it's the opposite. It's telling you that drugs can become the master of your life if you let them. And you know, I found all these articles and everything else and presented my case about you guys got it wrong, and finally I won. Okay, but they took it totally the wrong way, that it was telling you, and that's not what it was. So that's kind of what this is. He's being totally misunderstood and everything. The kids get him, but the adults don't. Same thing.
Well, I feel like that type of thing is uh, kind of like an animal that started like in the 50s with rock and roll and and also with comic books and how they thought that music controlled the minds of the children of America. And it I mean, there was a total fear that anything that was written, anything that was seen, anything that was listened to would tell these kids to go out and, be destructive or be killers or things of that nature. And I think it just kind of blew up. And then I think in the here and now and in the present day, that's what cancel culture is. you know, it just metamorphed into something entirely different.
Well, I mean, these things. These things definitely tend to go hand in hand with one generation not understanding the next, so to speak. All right. Well, actually, before I go into my impressions, actually, I'll just move on to Dustin, who's here. Is this your first time being introduced to Pump Up the Volume? Oh.
It was my first time seeing it. First time for everything with it, really. This is gonna sound really stupid, but Christian Slater was the guy from Heathers, right? Because he looked mega familiar.
Yeah, he was from Heathers.
Okay.
He was also in Tales of the Dark Side, the movie. He was also in the Alone in the Dark movie, based
Robin Hood.
He was in Robin Hood as Will Scarlet, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Well, I didn't see the '90s Robin Hood. I had toys from it, but we never saw it. But anyway, so I was pretty happy with this. Like for the first half hour or so, I wasn't really sure like where we were going with this, where it was going, and I was kind of bored. But it definitely ramped up and got a lot more interesting pretty quickly after that point. So I was really happy with it, and I'm kind of annoyed I didn't see it a lot sooner, honestly. And it seemed like it has a pretty good message, I think, overall. And I'm kind of I'm curious, did it stick with anybody? Like, were there more people trying to do like pirate radio channels, or as with the advent of like the internet and podcasting, it seems kind of like it came true a little bit. Like anybody can broadcast anything anywhere now. You know what I mean?
And
Well,
that is the question, to be sure.
I mean, I do think that broadcasting things.
Which one do you want?
What the fuck?
It is interesting where broadcasting has actually gone. I know that there used to be a lot of rules and regulations and laws that you had to have certain amount of, know-how, and evidently your voice had to be, especially if you were in broadcasting radios as signals, you had to have permission almost to be on the air. And I think that's why the FCC was involved in this one, and it didn't exactly in America like you voicing your opinion outside of controlled air.
Well, I mean, you got to look at the time period. I mean, it was late 80s, early 90s when this came out. And really and truly, that kind of end of Reaganism, I guess, start of the Bush the first years in office, that was really a time where censorship was at an all new high. That whole idea of the satanic panic, the we gotta save the children from the demon music and the devil lyrics. Tipper Gore going after the lyrics when in the early Clinton years there. It's just like all of this stuff was amping up at this time. And people were feeling the pinch of it. We're feeling the pressure. And a lot of these kids were under that. Now, me, when this movie came out, I was 11 years old. So I probably wasn't listening to a lot of talk radio back then. Actually, I can tell you I wasn't. So it's hard to say what this might have had as an effect there. But there were a lot of movies around that time that really did show society trying to chafe at the bit, so to speak.
And I feel like the 90s was definitely an era of talk radio where people would actually listen to a lot of radio personalities that were on the air while they were going to and from work and whatnot. And now it's just it become, more widespread of who's saying what about whom. And I feel like a lot of broadcasting personalities moved to YouTube and, onto other avenues, and I guess it's not exactly as controlled. Anybody can pop up and just start doing a radio show of any kind. You just
And there were some interesting people. I mean, you had Coast to Coast come up at that time, which was the late night, which is really where you could see these people really thriving in the late night, the more free spirit ones. You got to hear the UFO talk or the weird things. And the daytime you had the kind of the rise of more of the political pundits that got out of control in the mid 90s to early 2000s. But nowadays, I think if you're listening to radio, it's usually either right-wing political pundits or really, I don't know what else is like on their garden talk. Most everything else is online these days.
I happen to agree.
But when I was introduced to this, my father was big into this sort of thing, this kind of, he was very outspoken when it came to his political thoughts and his thoughts of views for kind of freedom and speech and all of that, which he really liked talk radio more than this one, but he did really resonate with this a bit. I think that he was kind of too removed because he was around the age I am now when he first saw this in '90, and that kind of removes you a little bit from the generation that that this was originally meant for. But it did resonate some with him, and then when he played it first for me, and I saw it at age 12, I really couldn't see much farther than the the filthy language and the scene where the one where the female lead shows off her boobs, which I was 12.
They were pretty hard to forget. Those I'm trying to figure out a tasteful way to say this. Better than most. Okay, fine. I'll just say it.
But I rewatched this several times because he would usually try to put it on as one of those that cycled. And I admit, as I got older in my teens, I could relate a lot more with Christian Slater's character. I mean, I was that kind of kid that had a lot more in my head than I would actually have on my face, because I would typically try to disappear amongst the bullies in the school. When I was growing up, if you were, caught by the bullies in school, they would break your arm, and the teachers would just ignore them if they were with certain types of groups. And that would just be one of those things. So you put your head down or you got hurt. It was one of those things. So I could see that with the whole thing there, the parents and those kind of being aloof about the whole situation, not understanding it. So I could definitely vibe with it a lot. And watching it today, I felt still the kind of emotional surge, because today I work with a lot of teens who are under this kind of pressure and have similar stories to these other kids. And, it's still that similarity. They have so much going on inside, but they have no way to talk, no place to express themselves. And a character like this, Harry Hard-On, he, that was a place for them to express themselves. So, to me, it does hold a bit of a stronger place in my heart than talk radio. But both have endings that could be considered questionable. But I feel like this one was a little bit more powerful in its own way. So let's just go ahead and get started. Oh, go ahead.
I agree that it was definitely more powerful.
So, also, did anybody see the coincidence that he used the name Happy Harry Hard-On, and of course, what the the fact that he was basically making fun of the high school, which was Hubert Humphrey High School.
Yeah, I saw that. Is the HHH.
That was a good touch. I didn't realize that until near the very end when like his broadcast was going on and they were driving by the school. It's like, oh, okay, that's why didn't I pick that up before? Oh, that was a good touch.
I didn't pick it up at the beginning when I first watched the movie, but I was also 12, so I give myself some credit on that. But I've watched this a few times over the years. I'm sure if Jake could be on with us tonight, I think he probably is the only one of us that's probably seen this one all the way through around the same time I did. So, but let's go into talking about this film. We've got this radio broadcast essentially as he's turning on his little setup, the kind of the middle finger that goes on when when his transceiver goes live. And you get a basic idea as to his little show and people tuning in, and a little warning where you've got the kid typing out the letter "I want to kill myself" essentially, which came on much earlier in the film than I remembered it happening this time around. But of course, you have him doing his business where he's reading out letters on the air. He's basically doing a little talk about the people and the school. Even has some digs at some of the administrators there. What do y'all think of the character of Harry Hardon?
Well, it's a good radio persona that really met everybody kind of where they were at, because they made a lot of emphasis about everybody kind of feels like this, but they just don't let it out. And like having that radio persona allowed him to really just cut loose and let what was on his mind out. And it was kind of an extreme personality. But I mean, that was the whole point. So I mean, I think he came up with a great persona for that show.
He was saying what everybody wanted to say. Like it's just everybody was afraid to say it. So, or even think some of these things. So I feel like, in a way, this radio persona was like his therapy of everything that he was dealing with. And his own personality. He couldn't talk to women or any other person. So it's almost like this radio personality was his like diary in a way, but it was coming across to other people as a likable character, So
there's even a part later.
It's definitely interesting how introvert and outrovert he really was, like two different spectrums.
And there's even a part
I thought.
Go ahead, Tammy. Go ahead.
I thought that was really interesting. That basically, he had. It was almost like he was two different people. He was so, so different. In school, he was quiet. He didn't talk to nobody. He had the glasses on. He kept to himself. And then when you see him on the radio, he is somewhat wild, no glasses on, smoking cigarettes, just going totally berserk. I mean, it was like almost two different people.
Yep, he's got several things going for him. Like even one time later, he's even going on that thing like, I can't talk to you. I can't talk to this, but I can talk here. So he goes into the radio and he starts talking about it because he can talk there. And we all have that where there's some way that we can communicate, but it's sometimes hard to get it out the way we want it to. We're afraid that we'll be judged. And high school is the place where everybody judges everyone. And not only are you being judged by all the students around you, but all the adults, all the faculty, everybody. It's a pressure cooker. But he lets all that out by, obviously masturbating on air, like 8 times in a row. One of them said, as you see the Foley work. He likes to play different sound effects, and they say different types of music. He has the letters, like the red letters written by the one admirer. The I can't think of what the. Do you remember? Does anyone remember the pen name that she used? It was like the push me, pull me, or something like that, or
push me, pull me, or red something or other. Trying to remember.
And even and of course, part of his fighting out is to take some of these letters, which his father is a superintendent of schools who just moved there. They were just moved from New York, which is part of the thing. He had to move away from his environment, from his friends, and they got him this this shortwave radio, which of course can't reach to New York. It's like, you can use this to talk to your friends. Never mind.
It's like the Simpsons gag with the freaking convoy. Anybody knows what I'm talking about?
Yeah. But so I mean, it's so he ends up using that his father's connections to get a hold of some of the school documents. And one of the things that he did was he got a hold of one of the guidance counselor's documents, which really does start you on this kind of mystery, that this kind of dirtiness that's going on underneath the surface of this really clean town, of this girl who got pregnant, and the guidance counselor kind of recommending her be like dismissed from the school for being inappropriate, essentially, and him then calling up the counselor and pretending to be somebody else, and just embarrassing the dude entirely,
which made that guy start some hotline.
It was so funny, like all the things they tried to counter, like what he was doing. Like the dork ass hotline, it's like open from blah to blah, and it's like, oh no, I can't kill myself after 3 o'clock, or whatever the exact joke somebody made was. It's like, you know what? Yeah, that's a good point. It's always pretty funny when those things have like strict hours, It's like it totally defeats the purpose, and they called that out right away.
And he showed something that is still an issue today, is that parents do have the right to look at all of their children's files. Now, what he did was unethical anyway, because he was sharing it with the administrators and helping them use them as ways to get undesirables expelled from the school, which that is very unethical right there. But when I have a child in the office with me, and I know the child is there to try and talk and have their stuff heard, I make sure that they know with the parent right there that, yeah, your parent can access these files. We discourage it. We don't want people doing it, but they do have the right to do it. You'll know, and I'll tell them when I'm one-on-one with them. I'll say it frequently. Every time I make this speech, it's like, so you know your parent as well as I do. Do you think they're the kind of person who's going to be looking over your back at this? And then we have a talk about that. Most of the time off the record, because there's only a few things that I look at as extremely important, such as, harm to self, harm to others. I'm not going to let that happen. But things like day-to-day, things that could just be embarrassing for them to have their parents look at, that's, irrelevant in some cases. And it's violating your kid's trust. And I've told parents that before. It's like, yeah, your kid's going to really open up a lot when they see you looking over their shoulder, the entire time they're in therapy.
Well, even when they're talking to your teacher at a parent-teacher conference, you know, there are lines that parents can cross that happen at these parent-teacher conferences all the time, you know, especially until you're the age of 18. You don't know what the hell your teacher is telling your parent, you know, but a lot of times, sometimes those can be good, and a lot of times, sometimes those can be bad. It all depends on how involved your parents are in your life.
Well,
I
I
mean,
know from personal experience, therapy really doesn't do any good if the parent is in there with,
oh yeah.
because the kid is not going to say anything. You know, when I was a kid, and I went through with my mom. She'd give me that look, and like her eyeballs will almost look like they're gonna pop out of her damn head. You know, like when the therapist would ask something, and she'd look at me, and the eyes would get out. Oh, yeah, I better watch what I say. Yeah. Uh,
Exactly. It doesn't do a lot of good when the parent gets over involved. And I try to tell parents this, but that's also why I got out of child therapy as soon as I was given it out, because I always looked at it like this: when it's adult therapy, it's just usually you and the adult. And the only people allowed in the adult therapy are you and the adult, because they need to give written permission if anybody wants in. But with the child therapy, it's basically you, the child, and whatever family those parents want involved. And I used to make the joke, as like, I have five clients instead of one.
and most of the time,
Well,
the child is the therapy because of the main adult.
and
So it
most of the
doesn't do
time,
any good. Doesn't do any good if that main adult is in the therapy.
I would have to say that the child isn't the one with the problem half the time.
But let's go to the school, because we do cut to the school to give an idea of that environment. You have some people, like, you got the popular girl that she just walking around and suddenly she's flanked by all the, like, you know, jocks and so on. You've got the sort of proto-goth girl that's kind of doing her own thing with the striped leggings and all of that, and the sea turtle necklace. Let's not forget that. It was always about saving the whales and the turtles back in those days. That was the environmental cause I remember back then. Save the whales, especially. The environment itself was very interesting, because they would go in there and you'd hear them playing the tapes. They had this whole idea, like, you can dance during lunchtime, and so they would actually record the tapes off of the radio broadcasts and then play them during the school time. And every time they would take one of these tapes away, another one just pop up. So what are y'all's thoughts about Hubert Humphrey High?
Well,
it was kind of
it
was like a prep school, right? That was how it was sort of portrayed.
Well, it's a high school. It is a regular high school, but it's one that's really high ranked, because all of their test scores are like through the roof. Of course,
I would have to say handpicked.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
there was a time before the whole No Child Left Behind deal where it literally was, as much as I dislike that policy, I'll admit that there was a time where you would see a lot of this, like, it was all based on test scores. You want funding for your school, you need to have the highest test scores. That was their measurement. And this school is getting lots of funding because of that.
The high school, honestly, for the most part, it was a typical high school. Although the teachers were a hell of a lot more devious than normal I mean, I know my school had some kooks in teacher positions, but these were mostly under the principal's thumb. Except for the literature teacher. I think she was the only one that seemed to be on anybody's side.
Is it me, or did they always have the literature teacher in a lot of these types of things be the one that's the free spirit?
It's probably one of the more creative fields, at least for like a high school, because most of the other topics I think are pretty rigid, right? Whereas literature is about interpreting literature. You know?
I don't know why, but I always keep thinking back to the professor in the college movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield.
It does look a little bit like that.
Or Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams.
I still got to see that.
Another very good, but very dark film. That also deals with some similar themes, if you think about it. You know, freedom of thought, freedom of expression. Probably not that far off year-wise either. I'm trying to think. That was what, 90s, 80s? My goodness. Dead Poets Society. It was 1998, so almost 10 years after this film. Actually, kind of at the end of that, because really and truly, the aughts were the opposite. But I think that's what happens when you really push down on something one way, it just goes the opposite. Whereas they were trying in the late 80s and then all throughout the 90s to suppress anything offensive. Very similar to today in some ways, but in a different sense. Then in the aughts, it was, we're going to do as much as we can to make things as offensive as humanly possible. Like every show, everything was about how far can we push the envelope.
Well, and through his radio
include that trend would explain. I used to watch a lot of Comedy Central as a teen in that era, and that would explain why there were so many just, how hard can we go shows drawn together and stuff. Because looking back on them now, I've been watching some people, some YouTube reactions for stuff like Drawn Together from people that are that were technically alive when that stuff was coming out, but definitely were not conscious of it. And they're consistently like, bro, how are they doing this? This is going so far for no reason. And it's that was kind of almost like a mandate. It seemed like sometimes. Just edge for the sake of edge.
It was the culture of the time, definitely.
Yeah, well, I didn't really put it together until you said that was happening in a lot of shows and media, and as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, it was. Hey, wait. And just all the missing pieces clicked for a second there.
Because, if you really look at it, look at all the TV, all the comedy, and all the stuff that was going on in the 90s especially. It was very clean. And all the stuff that was not clean was guarded under these special, this is R, this is late night, this is, hidden. So it was kind of just a weird dichotomy there. But, and again, that's how the pendulum goes. I have a feeling that we're going to see another shift in that speech, for better or for worse. We're probably going to be seeing, actually, we are seeing it, really, if you think about it. But it's coming. But with that being said, he's kind of picked out by the teacher because of the poetry he writes. there because he's like, yeah, I just thought that up, and she's like, you should just volunteer for the school paper and so on like that. But he's more in that like, I just want to stick to myself. Let me keep my head down and get through this. As his father, don't rock the boat.
When a teacher singles you out in class, sometimes it's embarrassing.
Oh yeah.
It's like if I wanted to like say something, I would have raised my hand or something. But in any case.
And of course, we're introduced to the principal as well. So
I typically didn't mind too much, like because in most of like my high school classes, I was generally kind of bored because I would read ahead or just need to keep my brain occupied. And so I usually knew stuff like just fine. And especially senior year, I got along pretty well with most of my teachers who kind of, got me to an extent. Like my English teacher, for example, I would do the readings early and then I would just like sleep the first like 20 minutes of the class because it was like right away in the morning, like ridiculously early. And after I turned in my first test, she was like, when I saw you sleeping every day, I was like, oh no. It's like, oh great, he's one of those. And then I graded your first test and I was like, oh no, wait, he's one of those. And just the way she said it was really funny.
I guess I kind of did in a way the same thing. I was bored a lot, and I did a lot of going ahead. Unfortunately, though, some of the teachers caught on to it, and almost like they call you out just to mess with you, because they knew that you were ahead of everybody, So I had to watch which ones I, did stuff with because, I would purposely not raise my hand and everything because I knew I was this far ahead of everybody. But then they call on me and they'd be like, "Oh, great! Now I got to sit here and backtrack and remember,
I mean, I
Well-
usually just remembered stuff. Like it wasn't that big of a deal because it was like the faster like we got through it. Does anybody know what this is? It's like, yeah, it's this. That means we can like move on with our lives instead of just like the awkward silence. So.
Well, the principal, of course, is slowly but surely kind of pruning the student body. And her main focus seems to be test scores. And they're all kind of learning about this Harry hard-on character, especially from the counselor who's like, that idea of like, where is he getting this inside information from? And admittedly, I think a lot of their focus in this is more about keeping their own secrets safe than it was about, protecting the kids. But of course, at this point, nobody's really caring or listening to them.
Nope.
But I
think that's what kind of helps build some of that teenage angst inside the students themselves as well.
Well, that starts to change when we get to his going back on the air. And you have a student who writes in and basically says to him that he wants to kill himself. Now,
and he calls himself Mr. Serious.
Yeah. Oh, he says, "I'm serious" at the end of it, essentially. Now, prior to that, there's a student that writes in basically that's saying, that their brother was molesting them and stuff in there. And that was a sort of a prank letter that he calls back. And he's like, "I sniffed this out. I can smell the bullshit." But when he gets on with him, he goes right in there and just like, well, how are you going to do it? How are you planning to do, going straight for that? Not at first taking it seriously until it gets to the end and you realize, and he realizes, and you can see in his eyes when he realizes, oh crap, this dude really wants to kill himself. And he tries to move in there. Of course, by that time, the guy has hung up and he's already made up his mind. And thank goodness they didn't show it, but they gave you the idea that he had gotten like a gun. You could hear the click, and then they don't even play that. They just do the click. But of him trying to plead on the air, look, I'm alone, but I want to be alone. I thrive at being alone. But like Furious has basically said, not all of us want to be alone. But that was really the first truly shocking thing happening there. I mean, the rest of it's kind of like shocking in a shock jock way, but this is more of a shocking in the oh my god way. What did y'all think of this particular interaction?
Well, I don't think anyone thought that the kid was going to off himself like that.
Well, yeah, he seemed unprepared to deal with like a serious call, or like it up until that point it had all been just like joking around, like everybody's having a good time. Like as serious as the problems he was dealing with by doing the radio show were, I don't think it quite crossed his mind that maybe some of the people who would call in and would be listening would be in such a serious headspace. So, because it really did, you could, like you said, you could tell how it caught him off guard, and he wasn't able to really pivot fast enough to.
Well, yeah, especially since he had just had his parents tell him that that they want to sign him up for, therapy himself, and he kind of just told them to go fuck themselves or something like that,
Well, yeah, his parents and him had an agreement. As long as my grades are good, you'll leave me alone. Basically, is what he said.
His parents are perfectly good with that. You could tell, like, Christian Slater's character, his parents were like perfectly happy being in La La Land.
They were pretty dumb.
Really happy not parenting.
And one of my favorite things in this whole is that they were all upset that he might actually be this broadcaster. That when they found the girl was in his room, and they thought he was just trying to hide up for basically, doing inappropriate things with this teenage girl, they were like, "Oh, well, yeah, go right ahead."
Well, yeah, I thought that was unique. I thought that was funny too, because his dad was just like, "Oh yeah, okay, no problem, yeah, okay." He was just, it was just like, dude, you're like just telling him that you don't care what he does with this girl. Well, that's fine, It's like
just like cheering him on along. It's like, okay. Yeah. Which it did fit because earlier they had been like really kind of ragging on him. It's like, go meet people, like have friends, like do stuff. And he was like, nah. And then I think that was part of that scene too. It's like, oh yeah, he did meet somebody. All right, great. Spend a lot of time alone with this other person. It's like, well,
instead of get the fuck out of my son's room. We don't want to be like grandparents.
Let's encourage this. It's like, well, all right. that added a. I know. I thought that thing was more funny than weird. Although the dad kind of kept trying to make it weird, but it's like,
yeah. He's a little bit too happy for that. Yeah.
The guy playing his father, wasn't he the guy who played Lex Luthor's father on Smallville? Or maybe that's someone different.
Never saw it.
I've never seen an episode of Smallville. Though I own it on Blu-ray, on DVD. But it was gifted to me, so I can say that. But then again, there's a lot of stuff I own on DVD I've not seen an episode of, so I can't really. I own too many things on physical media.
Oh, who doesn't?
But but this really does rock his world in a lot of ways, and let's just face the facts as it is. I mean, he's just a teen, and teenagers aren't really equipped to be full-on therapists. A lot of times when you're in your teens, you've got your hands full with your own emotions and trying to figure out yourself. You're just starting to work towards figuring out others. And, as somebody who's had to field calls like that on a regular basis, this Monday, I will finally drop my crisis license. But I had worked in the crisis field for mental health from 2004 all the way up to 2023.
Wow.
When I made enough money to say I really don't want to do it. I didn't want to do it when I was drafted into it, because I was drafted into it against my will. But in the early 2000s, our economy was crap in Virginia. So I wanted to keep my job. I had to do that work. But I had to field so many horrible calls, see so many horrible things like that. And I remember it being really hard on early 20s me. I cannot imagine how somebody in their teens would have to deal with that stuff. That would just be extremely hard to push through. And then having to push through the potential guilt that maybe I was the fault of it. I mean, one of the hardest things I ever went through when I was younger, not that young, but in my 20s when I worked this, is knowing that a call that I had not dealt with personally, but had passed on to somebody else to deal with because it wasn't my shift, that person ended up dying. And the first thing I had thought was, could I have done something? Did I let that person die? And that stuck with me for years after. Still does, to tell you the truth. So he does manage to move beyond it, but
it takes him a moment to do so, because he almost threw in the towel.
Well, it's also where our I can't think of what the heck she called herself, but the where his goth girl admire her manages to detective him by figuring out certain things, certain stuff that he says, especially stuff he even said in that suicide call about hanging out on the stairs and reading alone during lunch, things like that. So she had already started to figure it out, and that also kind of startled him. But he did pull himself through and go right back on the air after that. But that takes some guts to be able to do that.
Yeah, because his next speech after the suicidal kid ended up convincing Paige Woodward to jam her medals and accolades into a microwave, causing an explosion.
Well, And we all know that, the perfect kids, a lot of those kids are just constantly under pressure. It's perform, 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 like a show pony. Which she might as well have been, essentially. So
well, yeah, her father seemed to be controlling her life.
And in a way, if you look at it back there, it was that event that struck the school a heck of a lot more than the suicide did. They talked about it, but it was more them trying to cover up their own black eye than them worrying about him like kid killing themselves. It's kind of sad in that way, that where their priorities were.
Well, sadly, sometimes that's exactly where school's priority sometimes seems to prioritize their stuff at the end of the day. Not every school is out to look to help students. And I think that that's one thing this film touches on, is that not everything is as it seems,
But his speech kind of like that whole idea is like, let it out. Don't kill yourself. Don't do this. Just let your colors fly. Let it go. And that in a way, a lot of students resonated with that. And I really think that the thing that even shocked him the most and scared him more was the fact that so many people resonated with that. So many people resonated with him. And it kind of went beyond this kind of joke that he was doing and became something much bigger than that. Which, again, that's really where the school was afraid of that.
One thing.
Well, he was saying the hard truth, and that's what the school was afraid of.
Exactly. And the students were listening.
Yep. And you had the one
They
teacher
even
that was listening too.
But the funny thing is, if the school had left him alone, if they had decided to leave him be and not go after him, then his megaphone would not have been big enough to have brought them down at the end. So
yeah, they definitely contributed greatly to his myth making that made him so popular. Because he was popular to start with, but that just added so much more to it. Like there was, I listened to a talk about the PMC or whatever they were called, the old ladies who wanted the warning labels on CDs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a real case that can be made that a lot of artists sold way more records because the PMC was against them. It's if you had the sticker on it, it was it made you stand out or something.
Oh yeah,
or you want what you're not allowed to have, which I still do. So.
When those stickers came out, I was like, oh yeah, okay, this is something I gotta hear. I gotta know what
the parental advisory.
Yeah. I remember George Carlin had a cover on one of his comedy albums, and the cover was just him with his mouth open and the parental advisory right in there.
Part of that talk was that one of the reasons it didn't work the way they intended it to was because the label itself actually looked pretty cool, on its own. It's it had good complementary graphic design.
Oh yeah, I remember those explicit lyrics and things like that were on there. It's whatever.
Yeah. And I know he played one of the Beastie Boys controversial songs on here, I guess. So controversial that he he said that it was controversial at the time. That it was so controversial that the radio will not play it. It's banned on most radio stations. I don't know what song it was, but he played it over one of his radio things as one of his ending songs.
I mean, I remember getting Todd Browning's Freaks just because it was banned in the U.S. for many years, and that's that curiosity that comes into play. Like, what is it that the authority figures don't want you to hear? And
it ended up just being like that you saw like the different limbs that were missing of the people with the abnormalities. You know, that's what people were scared of, seeing the abnormalities of these people with these actual, like, you know, missing limbs or born with a birth defect, or, you know, and people didn't want to see that.
And now it's got its own Criterion release. But
it's funny the things that we were the censorship people, the things that they thought were so scary and terrifying that we don't want people to see it. A lot of it we now have it on display, you know. So,
well, there's always somebody wanting to ban something, whether it was
Dr.
actually
Seuss.
all sides wanted to ban. I mean, could be something as simple as well, because there was something that was potentially racially offensive in a cartoon or a book, or the simple thought of, well, there was a book written by a person of color, and we don't want any of our kids reading something by that. You know, it's stuff. It's stuff that goes over, because then that just brings people's curiosity to these things. Instead, people really, I mean, if you think about it, nobody really, I mean, people know about, say, let's take a look at 2 Disney films, good example. Let's talk about Dumbo and Song of the South. Both of them are infamous for being racially insensitive. But which one do people think of the most when they think of one that's going, oh gosh, what is this thing? They're going to think of Song of the South. And why? Because they kind of just took it off the market entirely.
And I remember I remember my great grandmother took me to see that movie. And I also remember my mother was very racist. Okay. And when my mother found out that my great grandmother took me to that movie, she blew a gasket. She was so mad at her for taking me to see that movie. And, you know, as a kid, I had no idea what was going on, you know. And my great grandmother didn't think that there was anything wrong with me seeing the movie and taking me, you know. And it's, now that I'm older, I understand what was going on, you know, now that I look back on it, and it was, I don't know. I think I personally don't see anything wrong with the movie. It showed what was actually going on. Okay. And that's, I guess, what people can't deal with.
Well, I think there's something to be said with the difference, because with Dumbo, for instance, they put up a basic, blank, boring thing at the beginning saying, this was filmed back in the days where there were different ways of looking at things, and some of these parts are racially insensitive, and this is how it is. This is how it would be considered racially insensitive. You're educating the people who want to know, but not banning the thing entirely. But by banning the thing entirely, people are left wondering, what is it? You know, you don't, if you're going to burn books, when people burn all the books that. What was it? There was like a senator or somebody that was running, taking a flamethrower to any book written by a gay author, saying, you know, I'm protecting the kids. I'll burn them all. And I'm like, okay. And then it makes me wonder, okay, so what's in those books that you did not want them to see?
Personally, I just think they should give the film to Criterion and let it rest.
But with that being said, you know, they continue to clamp down on it. The police get involved, and Harry ends up calling the guidance counselor again. Of course, they also manage to get this. She manages to the goth girl manages to find out who he is by, of course, tracking his P.O. box and staking it out. Now, or confirm really who he is by watching that. And there was also another one that he calls back about this kid who was having an experience. I mean, the kid was obviously gay, and he was being, you know, made fun of for it. And he was able to actually come up or talk to this one a little bit better than he did the one that was suicidal. I don't think he got through all the way, but he did manage to say a little bit more on that one. But then he basically went and was reading some more stuff, calling up the new hotline that the guidance counselor had to talk about another student that was being unfairly punished and ostracized because of like test scores, or I can't remember what it was, that particular one, which they had said that he's tracking the phone. It's like, oh, we've got this done. And so at first you think like, oh crap, he's caught because he said that. And he's like,
I didn't.
And he's like, no, folks, I'm nice. Harry's nice and safe. But there's probably an older couple right now that's going to be bothered by our local law enforcement who have been unknowingly supplying me with their phone fee. And I did find it funny that he had actually figured that out at the first part. And that was also when we had the scene where she, you know.
I appreciated he had done his research on like getting around traces and things like that would be problems like before really starting this. Back in a time when looking that up would have meant you have to go to like a library or something and do it all like in person. So the initiative was impressive. But he seemed to be so on top of things. Like I didn't doubt for a minute that he had some way to thwart that system. So it was kind of fun how he like played it up on the air. It's like, oh no, they got me. And he waits just long enough for the cops to like find the dummy phone. And he's like, well, not really.
And he has a voice modulator. I mean, he wouldn't have been probably calling a lot of those people as he did if he didn't come up with these types of things. He even had his own way of hiding his setup from his parents, because when his parents were trying to come in, when they were trying to figure out who he was, and they thought maybe it was him, and find the girl in there, he had all these things that he could put in front of the radio and all that stuff. They're like, who are you talking to? It's like, well, he was talking to me. Because that was also when he does his little speech of, I can't talk to you, directly to the girl there. And they have that scene where, they just kind of go around in circles, both with their shirts off. For that interesting moment.
Oh, yeah. I actually thought that part was actually somewhat romantic, in a sense. Since it's almost like she was trying to kind of make him feel comfortable around her because he fascinated her,
Oh,
even though he,
and it was
you know what I
her
mean.
that cut it off. That it was her to cut things off at the end of that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they were like on the lawn, and there were cops like across the street.
Oh, yeah.
So I feel like that's probably the only reason that didn't go any further in that moment, because he basically, Christian Slayer basically did the same scene in Heathers with Winona Ryder.
It's almost some similar looks between the actress that played this girl on Winona Ryder and some of the characters that she played.
Well, that's just what pretty girls look like back then.
Yeah. A lot of 90s, a lot of those late 80s, 90s fashions in this film. It's hard to believe people want to emulate that stuff again. But of course, then again, I now know what my mother must have felt like when I was in high school and they wanted to bring back bell bottoms. Because I could tell that she was just like rolling her eyes at that, like at the time. And we're about as far back from the 60s as we are from the as I was when I was in high school, about as far back from the 60s as we are from the 90s right now, which is kind of
alarming.
Yeah, well, definitely makes you feel your age a little bit. But hey, I'm also getting to that age where they're moving away from my part of the culture. They're still overhyped on the 80s, but that'll move on shortly. It's going to be 90s soon. And then in about 10 years, my culture will be forgotten entirely, and they will move on to the aughts. But essentially, that's when they bring in the FCC. And the police are like, well, obviously they're carrying these tapes across state lines, so it must be, we can call the FCC now. That seems like a reach, but it worked.
That was good. I like how he had the FCC guy's number like right away. And like the only thing the FCC did was just embarrass themselves, like trying to catch him.
Well, I mean, at the whole of it, he knew he was kind of debating it and thinking about hanging things up, but she did manage to convince him that he needed to go on. And by trying to speak up for the students, the English teacher gets fired, and a whole bunch more of the students get expelled just for it. And that's when I think that he realizes things are just really too far, and he has to make that internal debate as to whether he needs to go along with what his father says and, don't rock the boat, especially when you're in it. Or go for broke, knowing that he's gonna come down and fall down crashing and burning. And I gotta admit, his setup for flaunting the FCC was a pretty genius little setup right there. I mean, what do y'all think of his little mobile radio show?
Oh yeah, mounting it to a Jeep. That was a good idea. And he's when he's just mocking the FCC guy, it's like, so, your failed political career, got you this job, huh? Is that why you did this? And that's pretty accurate, frankly, because a lot of people who are kind of put in those positions are almost just tokens. It's like a concession. Somebody will probably be mad at me for saying this, but like Pete Buttigieg, transportation secretary, after strangely dropping out when he probably would have been ahead of the rest of the field. That kind of thing does happen, and so I wonder, like, in the world of this, like, if there had been some kind of, it's like, oh yeah, I withdrew my campaign from this one challenger. And that's how I became FTC commissioner,
Oh,
because he relates to that. And the guy gets so upset so quickly. It's like, okay.
I always loved the hypocrisy the guy would have, because he would talk about, I'm here to protect freedom of speech. And then he'd always follow it up with like, he needs to be stopped from saying that, or something silly like that.
Yeah, that was directly after like he started like asking those questions where it's like, so your failed political career got you this job, huh? It's like, we need to shut him up right now. And it's like, I think he has something on you. What do you
Then the whole earpiece thing as well. He automatically, his hand just went right to his head. But of course, and I do like how they're trying to track him, and they're thinking he's stable, so their vans are just running into each other on the road, trying to figure out where he is.
Right.
That almost reminded that whole scene there. Almost reminded me of like Smokey and the Bandit.
But it was. Yeah, I mean, and the whole thing, of course, then culminates in everybody, the news reporters and everything, just gathering in this field to hear this broadcast, including his father and a lot of the other people. And his father didn't really know what was going on in the school at the time, until he ended up hearing him talk about this on the broadcast. And then the kind of disgruntled teacher brings in the proof of all these expulsions, where the principal is like, well, yeah, I'm proud of that. I took the undesirables, the students that were going to bring our grades down, bring our numbers down, so that we could increase our own funding. And, actually, it's sad, because I saw this in action when I was in Emporia. They would mark kids as young as elementary school and start building cases for them, so that by the time they got to the high school, they would expel every kid that was poorly performing, which is why there was such a large amount of uneducated children wandering the streets of that city.
It's like school to prison pipeline shit, huh?
There's so much truth to it. It's scary. So what this principal is doing is not, unprecedented. It happens. And they can't, because of No Child Left Behind, they're not allowed to do that anymore in elementary level or even middle school, but in high school they can still do it. But they've got to build a case. So what do? Oh, the kid has ADHD. All right, let's start building things, even small infractions. Let's write it up on their record. Let's build it so that they have a full record by the time they get to high school. And then the first moment their grades drop, out the door permanently.
Ugh.
But
yeah, there's definitely a lot of truth in some of what was going on in this movie. And I'm sure that there is still stuff that's going on to this day.
But this principal was not getting away with it, because the superintendent basically fired her because he agreed with the kids. I mean, the one punk kid that would show up that she kind of kicked out first was like, I have a right to an education. That was the graffiti he would bring in. That's horrible if you think about it, that a kid has to bring in that as his freedom of speech. But
that does kind of put some credit on the superintendent character, because as oblivious as he was to what his son was doing with the broadcasts, like, he did snap onto that pretty quick. It's like, why is that your protest anthem? What's happening around here? Like, why would you? Like, he caught on that was a sign of like something else.
And they could tell he wasn't going to play ball with him when you first introduced him in a professional capacity, because they would hide that from him, essentially, because he was suspicious at the get-go. but he was just kind of taking their word for it. But they were expelled, like they expelled 30 kids at the beginning of the school year. That's a bit much.
Yeah.
And like right away into the year too. Like, are you just not trying to cover your tracks? I mean, come on.
So they end up, of course, catching him because, you know, they kind of run out of places to run. So he ends up just pulling up in the crowd, and they see, you know, they finally see Harry Hard-On as who he really is. And he and the girl both get locked up, but not before he yells out for them to, you know, take to the airwaves, to express your own thoughts. Even if nobody else is listening out there, there might be somebody. Put it out in the ether. Put it out in the world. So as he's being, you know, locked away, you get to hear so many other of these stations popping up. So though, yes, the FCC technically won in their capture of him, they didn't really. It just so many more sprang up around him.
Yep.
And I'm pretty darn sure that he was not that, you know, as far as him, it takes a lot to get a child like a permanent felony on their record and stuff like that. So the likelihood is, you know, he didn't do jail time. He might have done some time in juvie or something like that. But as an adult, he probably didn't do much of get much jail, or wouldn't have gotten much jail, or even suffered too much from it. Shoot, if he went into radio and communications in the early 90s, he probably would have actually had that as a boon to having that.
I was gonna say, like, it just seems like it would have been like a great way to, like, because he was getting national attention at that point too. Like, they made a point that what was it, like NBC or something was there, like, listening to him.
Exactly.
Like, he was good enough that I bet some producer like would have like intervened. Like, he probably would have even got a lower jail sentence. Like, I bet some network would want to just hire him for something.
Oh yeah. Oh, he probably wouldn't even have done 6 months in juvie. I've had kids that have near killed people that only done 6 months. So, you know, it takes a lot. But
Yes,
what did y'all think of the ending of this? I know when I watched it with my wife, she did not like the ending of this at all. She felt like it was anticlimactic, but I don't know. I thought this actually did have a resonance to it.
Though I understand exactly why or what was going on in the end, because I do think that police and authorities were basically not really understanding the whole situation. I do think that at the end of the day, they did have a message. To be arrested, I'm not sure if in this day and age that would have flown, because honestly, what they were saying was just a lot of freedom of speech and whatnot. But in the time period that they were trying to portray, I feel like there was a lot of things that parents didn't understand and teachers didn't understand, and even though the teachers and the principal and all that jazz, they ended up in trouble in the end. I feel like those two should have just been let go, because there were a lot of people who believed in them, you know. And honestly, I think they would should have just gotten a slap on the wrist and not that big of a chase, you know. But that being said, it wasn't a bad ending. Anyone else?
Well, I mean, with it being open like that, like I read a lot into, things worked out okay, because it's more fun to believe that, and the ending doesn't really give you much to think that anything really bad is gonna happen. Like everybody's kind of cheering him on and everything too. So, and then with the proliferation of the pirate radio stations at the end, like I think that the ending is pretty good in what it needs to accomplish, and I'm happy with it personally. I would have kind of liked to, it's like flash forward like 2 years, and he's got like a real show. Like I would have liked that, but I don't think we necessarily needed that. So I'm pretty satisfied with that ending. I guess that's my long-winded way of saying that.
I guess I somewhat agree with you, Dustin. I would have liked to see maybe a flash, like you said, a couple years in the future. This is where he is now, type of thing. Um, but I guess the ending worked the way that it did. It just it would have been nice just to kind of see what became of him, or just a little glimpse of the future or something.
Yeah, like an Animal House like montage thing or something. It's like what so and so went on to. It's like that would have been nice.
Yeah.
Well, I guess let's talk about. Before we move on to production, I mean, I'll go ahead and. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to say about the movie as a whole, plot-wise, before we move into production?
Not really.
Music, of course, is going to have its own section, so we're going to leave that out for the time being. But, go ahead, Dustin. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying it was great. that was my main thing. Yeah.
All right.
I was really pleased with it.
I think it definitely had a good emotional message that was pretty resonant and holds up today. I do feel that there's a lot of people that feel actually there's people on all sides now that feel kind of the kind of pokes at censorship today. And I mean, I see this on both political sides feeling it. I'm not going to say one is better than the other, even though I have my own personal thoughts on it. But there's definitely fights to censor on all sides, and people lash out when they feel threatened like that. And I think that that's sort of a sentiment that we can all feel today in a way. When you look at stuff around you, when you look at the world and you think to yourself, if I say what I want, then I'm just going to be shot down. So, production. Well, we had some production value there. We had the radio setup. We had a lot of the set design, the high school, the various fashions from the early 90s. Late 80s to show up. I always find it interesting those kind of blazers and stuff women wore back then, or the various hairstyles. What did y'all think of as far as? I mean, there wasn't a lot of special effects magic, but there was a lot that they did with set design. Costume design and things like that. What did y'all think of that?
I think it was pretty true. I think they did a good job. It showed like the different I don't want to say classes, different groups, basically, of the kids and stuff by how they acted, how they dressed, and everything. And I mean, the school and things seem pretty true and everything. I mean, the being able to dance at a certain time or whatever was a little bit different, but But
Yeah,
I'm just thinking
that seemed
about what
like more like
high
a
school was
50s
like.
concept.
And of course, keep in mind this did take place in Arizona, as setting wise, which is kind of a mix between the conservative, a lot of the conservative values of the South, but also some of the values of the West. It's kind of a weird meeting of the two.
Yeah, Arizona is a pretty conservative place, like overall. Like it's not really known for anything good. Like it's sort of funny. I have a friend who is like, Arizona seems so great, but I know about Arizona politics, and it's like, this is maybe one of the worst places you personally could go, considering what you believe.
I mean, as far as weather-wise is concerned, my asthma would be much better over there.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying they would like hate most of the people they would, interact with on the street, and a lot of the laws would be like in direct conflict with the way they live their life. So.
Oh yeah, true enough. Back to that kind of freedom of expression.
Exactly.
Well, speaking of freedom of expression, to me, one of the best parts about this film to this day is the soundtrack. When I look at films that I say to myself, I want to listen to the soundtrack, this is actually one of those films that I thought that when I first heard it. Leading off with the Leonard Cohen cover of Everybody Knows. And they even snuck in the original Concrete Blonde version at the end. That right there alone was one of the coolest things there. But it had a lot of cool music from the era. You had, of course, one thing that I just enjoyed was that whole thing. The Descendants were marked in there. I think the Beastie Boys was in there, I believe.
Yep.
But they had quite a few represented there. I love that. I was like, "Hello, Mom. I'm in jail. I'm in jail." But what do y'all think of the soundtrack?
I thought the soundtrack was awesome.
Pretty good.
I mean, the song that stuck out, of course, to me was that Leonard Cohen, that Leonard Cohen song. I mean, Everybody Knows is just such a. I mean, the original version is pretty dark in and of itself, but add Leonard Cohen's like bass tones to it, and it just has that like hollow, almost ghostly feel to it. But what do y'all think specifically of that one?
Well, I like Leonard Cohen myself. Personally, it's like I feel like you wouldn't have some other like songs like The Red Right Hand or even Tom Waits is like in that vicinity of singers. I feel like Leonard Cohen and Tom Waits could go hand in hand as far as musicians go. So yeah. I thought that Leonard Cohen's adaptation of that was pretty cool to have in there. And then, in fact, I kind of did like a YouTube wide search on other songs and stuff by Leonard Cohen because I remembered he did a rendition of Hallelujah as well.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too. The one from the Watchmen scene, which is really hard to get out of your head. So whenever Leonard Cohen is mentioned, like that's playing in my brain.
I actually thought that the song itself, that Everybody Knows, was a good representative of his show. It kind of had almost a sarcastic feel to it, but just that inner darkness that I think falls within all of us. I mean, I don't know if y'all just sat there and listened to the lyrics. It is a very dark song.
It is.
But definitely one of those. And I have listened to, actually, I tried to get the soundtrack a while back, but was unable to. But I did manage to secure a lot of the songs that I liked off of it. I mean, I listen now. I mean, a lot of the bands that were represented there I've listened to. I mean, I don't really listen to the Beastie Boys, but you know, I listen to the Descendants. I've listened to Leonard Cohen, Concrete Blonde, several of the other ones on there. You know, so definitely some cool stuff on there. Shoot, the Descendants must have been just starting out.
But yeah.
But, well, that was Pump Up the Volume. I guess we'll just go on with our parting shots with this. Why don't we start with you, Dustin? Do you have a favorite scene or even... and actually, the question I'll ask on the side is, when you were a teen, would you have tuned in to the Harry Hard-On show or listen to one of the tapes being circulated?
I was kind of a squishy wimp, so I think I would have been intimidated. I would have been intimidated by like some of like the language and like the jokes, but I probably would have still like tried it out because I really used to love stuff like South Park when that was coming out and when that was new, and if I could listen to the Harry show like, without my parents knowing, I would almost certainly have done that. So I would have probably been a fan after I loosened up a little bit.
So what was your favorite scene?
Oh, it's kind of hard to pick one, but I think him walking around the school when everybody's like excited about his character, and he's kind of realizing it's like, oh wow, I'm really, really popular. I can't tell anybody. And just his interactions with like his fan, who I assume becomes like his girlfriend. Like I like the scenes where she has to kind of pep talk him to, it's like, do you know why you're doing this? Well, this is why you're doing. It may have been for something else in the beginning, but this is why you're important to people now, and like why doing this matters. And I kind of like that he needs some convincing. Like he's not just a brilliant, I know everything, I always make the right decision like character. Like a lot of protagonists in movies like this are. It's like he does, doubt himself. And the scenes where we got to kind of see some more of that. Like I think just the whole thing after about the 40-minute mark was pretty engaging. So
once it takes off, it moves pretty quick.
It really does. Like there were a few times that I thought, oh, we're just getting started. It's like, what do you mean the movie's half over?
What about you?
I almost want to rewatch a bit more of the beginning so that I can get a better feel for some stuff.
It's one that you can definitely get a little bit extra out of it from multiple viewings, in my opinion. There's some nuances there. I'm glad that Warner actually did decide to add it to their archives so that I could get a Blu-ray version of that, which they did clean up a bit. The sound, well, if any of y'all watched the one I helped provide, it was the Blu-ray. But, the Blu-ray definitely, I think, improved on the sound and the visual quality, which was good. I like to see things like this preserved because this needed to not be in the bargain. Well, how about you, Tammy? What was your favorite scene?
What was her name? The girlfriend. I keep forgetting her name.
None of us can remember her name. They definitely said her name, right?
I have. Let's see. I can remember her. I can remember her. God, what was her name? Samantha Mathis's character, the Nora De Niro.
functioning.
Well, I really liked her because I like her uniqueness, her boldness, and you know how different she kind of in a way reminded, in a little bit reminded me of myself because I didn't go with this group and totally go with that group or this group. I got along with like everybody. I did, I did my own thing, but if I wanted to dress preppy one day, I did. If I wanted to dress like, t-shirt and the jeans, the next day. I mean, I did my own thing, which is kind of like how she did, and um I might not have been quite as bold as her, but I was to a point, and I think I would have probably been drawn to somebody like him myself because I always kind of like in high school, I stuck up for like the underdogs a lot,
Hmm.
I didn't think, how people treated uh, some people was right, and I said things about it, So I kind of really connected with her.
Well,
So,
was there a favorite scene?
oh, I like the ending scene when they're driving around in the Jeep and making all them people go crazy looking for it. But like I said, it kind of reminded me of Smokey and the Bandit, as I just watched Smokey and the Bandit the other day, and how he makes all the cars crash and everything, and they're all trying to chase them, and they're all trying to get them, and it kind of reminded me of that. And it was, and it was all, you know,
Actually,
for the right reason that he was trying to avoid them, and so I got a kick out of that scene.
come to think of it, you would have been going to high school around the same time this took place at, wouldn't you?
Basically, I graduated in '90.
So yeah, you would have been able to be in the same school, basically. Um, so when you were in high school at around this time period, would you have tried to tune into the Harry Hard-On show?
Possibly. I mean, I wasn't really into talk radio type of stuff. I mean, I would pay attention to certain things at certain times and everything, but I'm like I said, I didn't really belong to any specific group or hang out with. I hung out with a little bit of everybody, and a little bit more of the ones that got into the rock and roll than there was a little bit more of my group. But if they would have brought this up, hey, this is cool, I probably would have checked it out.
And it sounds like something you would have heard about amongst all the groups eventually, because it looks like every group of kids was eventually listening to it. Especially, I
Right.
guess,
I think the rockers would have heard about it first, and that would have been how I would have probably heard about it and said, "Oh, okay, what is this?" So yeah, there's a chance I probably would have checked it out just to see what everybody was up to.
hmm, what's going on? Uh, so let's see here. Huh. Well, I know Dave is close by you. I know he's having some connection issues. Did he want to? Do you know if he wanted to give his favorite scene or his thoughts?
I don't know where he went at the moment. He should be around shortly, I hope.
Okay, well, I'll actually, well, he's trying again. Wait, there he goes. There he goes. He successfully. You got back with us, Dave.
Yep. Sorry about that.
No problem. So what is your favorite scene?
Okay. My favorite scene. I have several, but one of my favorite scenes is when he actually comes back after the suicide, because the suicidal dude Malcolm or whatever his name was, and he comes back with a speech that even I would have connected with. I think a lot of kids end up going through exactly what he was talking about, how there is entirely a level of boredom, in teenagers. Everything's been done before. Things to keep your interest, and some of the things he was saying was resonating, and the thing that he was shut down for a lot of it, towards the end, but I think that that whole speech was my favorite scene, besides him being able to take the radio on the road.
I only wish I had the level of entertainment that I have now as a teen. Shoot. With the time I had when I was a teen playing video games, I would have finished Shadow of the Erd Tree already. Now I can't even afford to buy it, but but it wouldn't matter. I'm still working on Baldur's Gate as a game. But so
I'm still playing the same arc map right now.
So how about so in high school? So let's see. Actually, well, there's a good question. So Tammy was ending her days around that time of this. Dustin, were you in the high school the early 2000s maybe?
Yeah, I was 2003 to 7 roughly ish.
And Dave, you were in what
I started freshman year in 1999.
Interesting years there. So
I was born in '84, so I was maybe 6 years old when this movie came out.
And I was in school pretty much the 90s, the mid 90s to 97. I was in high school, so it was definitely past mine, but I guess not as on the nose as Tammy would have been, because you would have been right there when that kind of culture and dress and all that was going on.
Oh yeah.
So I can't say that. I got there around the time the grunge and the jean jackets and everything was going on there.
A little bit of that when I had a jean jacket because Led Zeppelin's my favorite band. I had a whole the whole Swan Song thing airbrushed on the back of it, and I had my pins on it. And my buddy had a Kiss jean jacket. He had his done the same way. So, and there was friends and stuff that would wear their jean jackets or leather jackets at school, because my best friend, he's 6 foot something, and he had this big leather jacket with all the fringes on it and everything, and he didn't trust it in any lockers. So when it was gym class, he'd hand it over to me. I was like, okay. I walked down the hall, I put this thing on, and I go, I'm flying, because this thing was just huge on me with all the fringes and everything. And then I give him mine when I'd have gym class, and he'd hold it well, what's this? It was so much smaller than his, But we did, yes, we back when I was in school, yes, maybe we started the jean jacket, leather jacket thing in school, or just continued it from the 50s, 60s type,
So, so Dave, if Harry Hardon was broadcasting when you were in high school, would you have been one of those to try and listen in?
Yeah, if I had known about it, I would have probably listened in. I mean, you're talking to someone who I still remember tapes, and I used to have some tapes from like Abbott and Costello, Duffy's Tavern, the Green Hornet. My mom kind of got me into like some of the old radio programs, and I kind of thank her for that. She would go to this place in Racine called the Boathouse, and it was basically a place that sold video games. Well, not video games, computer games, I think, books, toys. You could actually get like real rubber snakes there, and all that kind of jazz. And you could buy things on tape that were like radio programs and stuff that looked like the Little Orphan Annie, like radio type thing, like a greatest hits type thing. And that's what got me started on radio stuff. I mean, at one point in time, radio was the thing for you to tape from, you know. And that's where mixtapes come involved in. So
before I owned any CDs, I would like record cassettes off the radio. So I caught the very tail end of that.
Oh, I had tons of mixtapes, tons.
Oh yeah, I was at the tail end. Actually, I was in the strong sign of the mixtape era as well. I think it wasn't until college I started making my own CDs, but yeah, the tapes were definitely big when I was in school.
but
So,
yeah,
but would you have tried to tune in even knowing that, you know, the schools and your parents were forbidding it?
Oh hell yeah! I mean, no, everyone who went to school didn't like school.
So, for me, my favorite scene is when, oh gosh, what was it? Darn it, I had it in my head, then it vanished. It was one of those scenes where he was taunting it was when he was calling, and then they say, "We got you tracked," and then the police come in, and he's like, "Don't worry, I'm perfectly safe." Where they're talking to that older couple. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. That just cracks me up every time I've seen it. Especially the way he holds them in suspense, like, oh my God, I've been caught, you know. But in high school, I definitely would have been tempted. I'm not sure whether I would have listened to it or not. It depends on when in high school, to tell you the truth. Early high school, probably not, but probably mid to late high school, probably yes. I mean, I can say that I hated high school. I still consider high school probably the worst 4 years of my life. But I will say that that would have probably been something that I would have resonated with as a kid. The younger version of me would have been a little bit too afraid of the kind of cursing and the vulgarity, even though my father did play that sort of thing for me played me the movie when I was like 11. But still, it would have definitely been a curiosity as I got older, and probably around mid 10th to definitely 11th and 12th grade, I would have been tuning into that, because I was beyond the whole I'm shocked by bad language and stuff like that, and more fascinated by it. Well, that's all I got. So, Dave, hand it back to you. Wrap us up.
Well, my name is David Strege. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us on this fantabulous journey that we've been going on. Glad we got this month over with, but it is enjoyable to get some birthday pics out there for both of us. So I think we can tell the audience a little bit about ourselves. So Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I have a YouTube channel where I showed off the cool horror stuff I would find here around Milwaukee. And we've been on involuntary hiatus for a long time because there's not really a whole lot of collecting going on. I've been trying to branch the channel into other fun stuff that's not focused on, buying things. But I've had quite a lot of life difficulty stuff just straight up stop me. So the channel is The Crypt of Horrors, and I'm trying to figure out ways to bring it back. So just go subscribe to that and bear with me, I would hope. I have a Twitter where I'm pretty active, talking about horror movies and just kind of whatever. Cryptaxis. And I have an Instagram, The Crypt of Horrors, as well for the collection. I was doing a little bit better on posting there, but not perfect. So I've also been trying to do a log of the movies I see at Letterboxd, and I think I'm also Cryptaxis on there. So I've written a handful of just kind of quick reviews for a lot of the stuff I've seen there too. So, and those are fun. So if they're any good, let me know and I'll keep writing more. So just go give me a follow on all those places.
Alrighty, heading over to Tammy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I go on this channel and another one with David, my fiance, and talk about movies with everybody and check out ones. I've checked out a lot of movies that I've never seen before because of it, and it's interesting to see them and hear what people have to say. And now that it's summer, I have fun taking out my car to the car shows.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Brandon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I'm SeptumSin, a SeptumSin versus the world. We love physical media, and we try to do a lot. We've had a lot of pickups that have kind of just stacked up over the last year and a half that we've been on hiatus for that. And so Jake and I have been kind of getting a couple of those out. There's another one that's coming out this Wednesday. So you get to see them and support them. Of course, I have a new, I'm actually finishing up the editing on my one show, Tabletop Horror, which I've just got one more episode to edit, and I'm just being lazy about it because I want to get some artwork and get a physical also released to that. But we are doing a series dedicated to the kind of ending of Disney making their own physical media and now kind of moving that to Sony, which monopoly is a good term to use when we think about Sony in a lot of these areas. But the Disney Movie Club is ending at the end of this month. So, and really it's ended for anyone wanting to buy from it. But so we're going through every film in my collection that was released by Walt Disney Studios, which is quite a sizable amount of movies. The first part's going to be this Thursday, which is just stuff that kind of is not released by them, but should be talked about, or people would have thought they would be. And then we've actually got we're going to have that every Thursday until we're done. And we've got lots of parts of this. I don't think people wanted to have like a big, 3 or 4 hour video. So we're just splitting it up into stacks, essentially. Okay. So it's going to be a fun thing to look at, little go through. The first one's not really as chronological, but after that, we try to show it chronologically from the earliest to the latest.
That sounds fun. So
It is, and our pickup, Jacob's pickups are his last movie club, Disney Movie Club order. So that also kind of is a good pre-show. But next week we're going back to my month, Strange May. Finally get Dave's pick done. So you can tell us about your pick for Strange May.
yeah, most definitely. Well, my name is David Stringy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore, so thank you for coming along with us on this fantabulous journey we've been having. I also moonlight on a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where we also discuss movies on Sundays with an entirely different group. But I also do some video pickups and some video reviews from time to time. So check out some of those videos. But lately, I've been kind of getting together with Brandon here to get the second act of Tales of the Forgotten together and figure out whether I'm doing a third to the anthology or not. But that being said, the anthology that I mentioned is Tales of the Forgotten, which on the 4th of June we released on Blu-ray and DVD. So you can catch the Kunaki store that I believe Brandon has embedded into the channel, so that you can check out what we have for sale. I believe we have Amityville webcam for sale, and also a DVD of the variant short films that Forrest was actually in. And in a sense, he kind of like half directed or the short films that he was involved with Joe Sherlock. So it's kind of interesting how it all came about. But looking forward to eventually filming the rest of the second act of the anthology and the ideas that I have for it. So hopefully we can get it all finished by at least the rest of summer's end, and hopefully have another release out there for you. But as Brandon said, we did and are going to be finishing up Strange May as we moved forward a discussion on a very creepy version of Hansel and Gretel in a Hansel and Gretel an opera fantasy, which
That's
was
like the stop motion puppet one.
Yeah, it's a stop motion puppet one from the 80s that I know anyone who has ever seen it has often mentioned its creepiness. So I thought I'd bring it forward. So in any case, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time here on Inside Movie School. Everyone say good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Watch this
night.
movie.